Today I want to share out of Luke in chapter 8, and it's this moment where Jesus is coming in. It says back, and he's like coming back in, and there's all these crowds, these people that are gathered around him, and it's like actually suffocating. It's actually the word that they use is that they were being thronged, which means literally to be choked or to be pressed on every side, almost to suffocation. And these people were just, if you will, you can say pressing in. They were coming around Jesus. But in this, it says that there was this man, and he was this man that was a ruler of a synagogue. His name was Jairus. And to be the ruler of a synagogue is very, what you would say, similar today to being a pastor. He, had to figure out and deal with things in the church, the area. My shoes untied? Okay, cool. Like, is it cool or should, okay. Let me tie my shoe. I didn't know if it was cool to have your shoes untied now or not, but I might trip. They're long shoelaces. But he, figured out the order of the services and what was supposed to happen there as they gathered together in the synagogue. And, he was a religious leader. And he was well known. People knew who he was. And he had this daughter that was dying. So here, in Luke 8, we'll just go starting in verse 40, and it says, "So it was when Jesus returned that the multitude welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him." Everybody was waiting for him, waiting on him, waiting for him. "And behold, there came a man named Jairus, and he was a ruler of a synagogue, and he fell down at Jesus' feet and begged him to come to his house. He invited him in. It says, for he had an only daughter, about 12 years of age, and she was dying. But as he went, the multitudes thronged him." Literally, remember that meaning to choke utterly or to press so much that there is a struggle to breathe. They were pressing. I just imagine that. There were so many people and pressing around, like up against Jesus, the disciples, those that were with him and walking with him, and all of a sudden they're just coming out of everywhere. They were waiting for him, and they're coming around and pressing on him on every side. And it says this man, Jairus, comes and he falls at his feet. It says he falls down and begged him. Begged him to come because his 12-year-old daughter was at home and she was dying. She was in the process of dying. And very quickly, as we see later in the scripture, she was going to. But in the scripture, what happens next is so interesting to me because it says, as he was going, in verse 43, as he was going, the people were thronging him, and so he started to walk to Jairus' house, started to go with him. He said, yes, I'll come. If you've invited me, I will definitely come to your house. But then all of a sudden, something happens. There's like this break in this moment that causes Jesus to stop. In verse 43, it says, "Now a woman having a flow of blood for 12 years, who had spent all her livelihood on physicians and could not be healed by any, came from behind and touched the border of his garment. And immediately the flow of blood stopped." So interesting that it says that Jairus' daughter was 12 years of age. She was 12 years old, and he had this wonderful 12 years with his daughter, having fun, being her dad. They were parents to this wonderful young girl for a beautiful 12 years. And all of a sudden, there's this interruption. He's like, "My daughter, she's sick, she's dying." And Jesus turns like, "Yeah, I will come. You've invited me, and I'll come." And then all of a sudden, this woman, it says, comes, who's had an issue of blood for 12 years. He's had these beautiful 12 years. She's had a horrific 12 years. So she's been to all the doctors, every single one. She's actually spent all of her money. She's basically poor now and doesn't have anything because she's spent 12 years searching high and low, and this doctor and that doctor, and this way and that way. And, there were multiple different ways that they tried back then to stop specifically this issue. But, there were the doctors, there were the rabbis that they would go to, and they would have them pray for them, all these different things. I imagine she had exhausted all of her options of what she knew to be done, and she just knew, maybe heard that Jesus, there was this man named Jesus, and he, at his word, at his touch, there were things happening, there were miracles happening, and so she comes in, not being healed for 12 years. And it says she came behind him and touched the border of his garment. Now, this issue of blood, this issue that she had, was in that day and ceremonially and really socially. Also, if you had this issue, that it made you an outcast of society, one that was pushed away, not one that you couldn't touch because they felt that if you were unclean, and if you touched somebody else, they would become unclean. So you had to stay outside. You had to not be in crowds. You had to, it was like this, here's your sign. I am dirty and I'm unclean and I have to stay away from everyone. But in this moment, you see, even as it says that she comes in and it comes behind him. Like she sneaks in. She's ashamed. She's feeling all this stuff that I'm sure being spoken over her, or she had just come to maybe grips with, that this is where I'm at. But these things of you don't fit in. You're not good enough. You're not clean. All these different things that she could say or had been said to her. But there was such a desire and such a passion, such like this. Imagine, this 12 years, and she's like, I have to do something. No matter what, no matter if it means that I have to break through this crowd that I'm not even supposed to be in, these people that I'm not even supposed to touch. And it says she touched the hem of his garment. I don't know, is she even down low and hiding something? It doesn't say this, but can you imagine with me? Because she's not walking through the crowd with her head held high and just bumping into people like, why'd you bump into me? You know, like, hey. No, she's coming in all scared and all ashamed and maybe even crawling. And so much that I just see that this is so much how we tend to feel and be about ourselves and different things that we deal with. I gotta come in, like I don't want anybody to know about this thing that I'm dealing with. I've heard people say stuff. I've heard these things. So we hide, crawl around. It was like maybe, I can get to Jesus, but it's definitely not head on, just coming right up to him. Maybe, I don't know, I'm going to go out to the crowd and see what happens. Also, what I think about this story is there's just something about, and it's this burden that I've had, and even last week in speaking, that there was just this feeling of like, oh, whoa, God, like, I feel that you're going to do something. Pastor Rick, what he shared about during worship, where we're at, and in that prayer, and this thought, this thing has just been weighing on me for a little while now. And in this scripture, it kind of points it out. That there was a crowd. There was lots of people around. Lots of people wanting to see what Jesus could do, see who he was. Maybe, oh, look, I saw his face. I know what he looks like. Hey, here's this guy. And being a part of the crowd, and even as it says that, that word thronging, pressing in, that they're in there like, I came and I went to that, whatever, that worship night. I went to that, that meeting that the church has, and I pushed in, and and I really made sure I got in there tight. But there's something about this, that there's so many that are pressing in, or let's say, it's hard to use that word, that are coming around and wanting to be there in a way, really a natural way, to be a part of something, to be able to be there when something happens so they can see it. But they weren't touching him. They weren't reaching out to him. They didn't really want to know him. They didn't really want him to know them. They just wanted to be there. And I am feeling this burden, and as I said last week, that I just felt this like, oh, it's almost like there's something, it's like that you can't get out. You ever been like, I don't want to say an argument or frustrated, but more like there's just but you can't even say it. You can't even formulate the words. You don't know how to express. But then also at the same time, not wanting to just throw all this stuff out there and not be ready. Because I've also had this thing in my mind about, like, are we ready? Are we ready? And Pastor Tori and I praying, talking. Are we ready? We want God to do something. Are we ready for that? This woman came, and even though she shouldn't have been in the crowd, even though, this is the outcast, the one that everybody says, man, I can't believe they're at church. How dare, not even that, how dare they come to church? I can't believe. Did you smell them? Did you smell the stuff on them? The stuff. It's like, I saw them out somewhere, and I just like, oh, yeah. That one, that person. And there were all these around this crowd. They were part of the crowd. They were there. And who knows, they might have been there many times, and they might have followed him from place to place, or every time he came in that town. And they were there, but there was a difference. And they may have felt really proud about themselves and very good. And, like, look, I'm clean, I'm good, and I'm coming in, and I want to see what's going to happen. It's going to be great. It's going to be amazing. But never really grabbing hold of who he is and getting from him who he is to see the miracle, to see, because they were just there in the crowd. And I think it's just a burden for myself, but I believe for our church and for everyone that we've been a crowd. We've been a part of the crowd, but that's not what he wants. He doesn't want a crowd. He wants somebody to come in and say, it doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter what people think. All that matters is that I touch even the hem of his garment. Like if I could just, I need him. And people were pressing all around. And imagine they're bumping into him, pressing in. Oh, yeah, I bumped shoulders with Jesus, yeah. But there was a difference. She came behind and touched the border of his garment because she was ashamed. She may have lost faith in the doctors, but somehow she mustered up enough faith to believe that if she was just able, not even, I think about that, not just I need to touch his hand, I have to, he has to put his hand on me, but I just know. Or maybe I'm a little curious, I may not be able to get that close to him, and I feel a little ashamed or a lot ashamed, so I don't know if I touch his skin, what will happen? Because people tell me that if I touch them, that I'm going to make them unclean. So maybe the power that's in him, it'll even transfer out of who he is into his garment, that maybe if I just touch his garment, just the hem, that word means the fringe, the edge, just the edge. Like not even grabbing hold because I'm afraid or ashamed to do that. like, I don't even know. I get this picture that it's like, it doesn't say grabbed, it says touched. It's like she just came up, and I've exhausted all options, all doctors, all things that I possibly know. And what I know now is that there's this guy named Jesus that's coming along, and there's so many miraculous things happen, and I need that in my life, and so I'm going to come. But even, I don't feel like I can really grab hold of him, but if I just take my finger and come and just touch the edge of his garment, something is going to happen. No, something has to happen. Because I need it. I'm in desperate need of that touch. I'm in desperate need of who he is. So she touched him. In Luke 8:45, it says, and Jesus said, "Who touched me?" Who touched? And imagine the way that's just explained. She didn't grab him. She didn't slap him across the face. She didn't grab his hair. She didn't even yank on his clothes. She just touched the hem of his garment. And he said, "Who touched me?" And everybody was denying it. I don't know. How could there not be like 10 people like, "I just bumped your shoulder, my hand just grazed against your hand. My foot, I actually just stepped on your foot. I'm so sorry about that," Because they were pressing in so much, but everybody denied it. And Peter and those with him said, "Master, the multitudes throng and press you, and you say, 'Who touched me?'" They're thronging you again, meaning that they're pressing in so much that we are actually like, "Hey, Jesus, we're suffocating in here because people are pressing so hard against us. How is it that you're asking who touched you?" 46, but Jesus said, "Somebody touched me." And he's like, this word does mean like it's to touch. But he's saying that there's just something so different about this touch. There's something so different about this contact with me. He says, "For I perceived power going out from me." Now, when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came. In another book, it says as he looked around, and it's like he looked right at her and said, "Who touched me?" And his disciples are there like, everybody's around and everybody's banging up against us. Like, how is it that you're saying everybody's touching us and bumping up against us? And he says, "Who touched me?" and is looking straight at her. And she realizes, right? She knew that she wasn't hidden. She was seen. He was looking at her. He knew who she was. Said, "Somebody touched me, for I perceived power going out." And falling down before him, she declared. Now when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling. And falling down before him, she declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason she had touched him. She declared, she came trembling. She's afraid. She's ashamed. This is who she was and how she felt. She came falling down before him. She knew she was seen. She wasn't hidden anymore. And it says she declared to him in the presence of all the people the reason. This woman that had to be hidden, this woman that had to stay by herself, this one that couldn't come in the crowd. That I know, like she didn't talk. She talked to her doctors about it, but it's not like you go around talking to everybody about the situation that you're dealing with here, that she has. And so many times we feel like that. She fell down and declared to him in the presence of all the people, the ones that told her that she was an outcast, the ones that pushed her outside of their midst, the ones that told her she couldn't come in close. In front of those, in the presence of them, she declared the reason that she had touched him, because she had this. She also declared how she was healed immediately. She knew immediately that she was healed. She knew. I mean, imagine, you're dealing with this for 12 years. You know when it's gone. I am intimately acquainted with the issue that I have. We're best friends. We know everything about each other. Like, I know. And she knew immediately that she was healed. But Jesus, he says in verse 48, and he said to her, "Daughter, be of good cheer. Your faith has made you well." There's a couple things in this that there's not another place where Jesus uses this daughter meaning like, I know you and you are part of the family. As a son or a daughter of the king, a son or a daughter of Christ, of God, that you're an heir, that you're loved, that you're welcomed, that I'll come in and wrap my arms around you. He says, daughter. He says, you're seen, you're known. I love you. You're not outcast. You're not pushed out, but you're in here with me. And it says, daughter. It says, stop. Don't ever again call yourself anything but daughter. Don't ever again call yourself anything but son. Don't ever again call yourself anything but a son or a daughter of God, loved, cherished, cared for, welcomed, taken care of. And in this moment, he didn't just call her out, because he felt something. See, in this moment, you have this woman who has this issue that keeps her an outcast, okay? And She's been pushed outside, and if somehow she's healed, somehow, even by a doctor, this is something that would take so much time and so much of people saying, I believe that you're healed and know that you're in a different place than you are now. You know, like the church people coming and saying like, well, we'll see if, you've really been set free from those addictions or those things that you've been dealing with. But Jesus turns around to her and he sees her and he says, daughter, you're my daughter. He's declaring to her and to everybody else. And in calling her out, it's not to make her ashamed or embarrass her, but it's to lift her up to a place in herself, for herself, but also for all the people that were around her, to say, look, this is my daughter. Look at who she is. Look at how she came. And there was everybody bouncing around, pushing up against me, but she is the one that touched me. She declared her healing and what happened. And he says, daughter, don't be downcast. Don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid. Don't be sad. Be of good cheer. And then he says something. He says, your faith has made you well. Go in peace. He said, your faith. It wasn't his garment. It wasn't his hand. It wasn't that he spoke the words. There's something in this that he wants us to see. And he's talking to all the crowd around now. He's saying she's well. I want to declare that this is my daughter, but also that she is healed, well, and whole. This is who she is now. And then also he says that your faith has made you well. That there's something about how she came to him that created this moment for a miracle, that brought this into the space, because everybody else was touching, the thronging, the pushing, the bumping up against, but she, in her faith, he says, your faith has made you well. Charles Spurgeon said this. He says, it's not every contact with Christ that saves men. It is the arousing of yourself to come near to him, the determinate, the personal, resolute, believing touch of Jesus Christ, which saves. He says it's not every touch. It's not coming into the service. It's not being a part of the crowd. It's not bumping into here and there Christ that saves us, that the miracle happens, what it is. So, right, what he says, the personal, resolute, believing touch, the faith, that coming in close, let's say. So he says, your faith has made you well. He wanted everybody to know. He wanted her to know. He said, I see that. Even if it's just that tiny little bit that you came with, but that little tiny mustard seed, right? What can that do? But I see that faith, and I'm saying that faith that you came with, that is what created this moment between us that brought you your healing. This changes kind of a perspective of how we should come. Right? Like in the other messages, different things about how it's like, it's not all the things that we do or how, you come in this specific order and do it this way or that way, or because you're such a good person, or, because you've done all this stuff before, or whatever. But what is it? It's that moment of coming and saying, I believe. It wasn't Christ's faith. It wasn't the disciples' faith around him. It was her faith. That she would step out of the hurt. That she would step out of the shame. That she would step out of the labels. And she would step out of the saying that I've tried everything and it hasn't happened, it's not going to happen. She would step out of that and believe that he could do it. And believe that the touch of Jesus could make her well. Would the band come and would you stand with me?